we're at the NAB show, and we've caught up with Keith Wymbs, who's the Vice President of Marketing for Elemental. Hi, Keith.
Hey, Fred. How are you?
Glad you could take a minute in this obviously busy situation to talk with us.
Yeah.
A lot of things have been happening lately with you guys, and of course, some of it surrounds new technology, namely HEVC. But before we get into that, I wonder if you can give me some sense of, just over the last 3 or 4 months, how you're seeing the market change with respect to the needs for the transcoding technology and the capabilities that you're bringing to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know it's really changed over the last 3 or 4 months, but something that's definitely obvious for us is the need for us to help migrate to next generation, right? So HEVC is one of those, right, at the codec level. But it's also in terms of the deployment architectures that are being put in place. So last week we announced the general availability of our cloud platform as a service. That's a really good example, right? In that area, we seamlessly allow our customers to basically migrate as fast as they want to. It doesn't have to be all at once. Their video processing to the cloud running on Amazon AWS and Elemental software. And we make it a seamless experience for them.
Now, when you say Amazon AWS and knowing that your platform requires the use of GPU as well as CPU chips, how does that work in using somebody else's data set?
Well, it works in 2 ways. One way is that AWS actually has deployed GPUs all over the world within their EC2 platforms. So we don't have a problem there. Amazon is ahead of that, and we've worked very closely with them over the last 2 years, actually. Obviously, they're most known for having CPU-based infrastructure in place, but they have GPUs all over the world as well. The second way we are able to handle that is we are not necessarily dependent on GPUs for our technology. Our software stack works just as well on a pure CPU, on a hybrid CPU, or a pure GPU environment. So we're fairly agnostic to the underlying architecture.
It's just an efficiency difference.
Yeah, actually almost all of our customers use our GPU-based technology because it's the most efficient use of resources, right? If you're scaling out massively, deployed scenarios where you're trying to do tons of content, if it's on demand, that's fine. If it's live, that's fine. When you're starting to scale into real deployments and getting beyond kind of science and kind of testing things out, your operational expenditures on just the content processing is extraordinary. And so over time, having a solution that has very high density, very high performance, and therefore very cost efficient from an operational perspective, it makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah. On the question of the cloud, I gather you're doing some things that not necessarily haven't been done before in terms of the flexibility of use of the cloud.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to address that, but I also am interested in, who is really willing to take this leap? Are some of your large broadcast customers or your large MSO customers, or is this more in the vein of people who are just looking to get in and don't want to invest in infrastructure?
Right. So, one thing I would say in terms of our cloud offering is it's a complete mirror of what we've done on the ground. So the customers that we're working with, which we haven't announced yet for the cloud environment, are typically ground customers of ours that are essentially extending that capability completely to the cloud. An operator or user would have no idea whether or not the units were in the next room in a data center, or if it had been extended to the cloud environment. They do, but it feels the same. They have the same feature set, parity completely. All the things that we bring to the table in terms of what we do with the likes of HBO and ESPN and MTV and BBC, all of that capability has been extended to the cloud. The second element is, when we look at cloud offerings, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen all at once. We see our customers universally looking at their visions for the cloud, and that's why we chose to have a solution that is very anchored in having a hybrid solution. It doesn't matter to us as a software company where it happens. If they want to buy physical units, that's great. If they want to have a hybrid scenario where when capacity spikes, they can handle it and do it in the cloud, that's okay too. Or if they want to go purely to the cloud, that's fine with us. But over time, we see You know, our two beta customers that we've been working with very closely are massive media giants. One is domestic, one is international. And their vision is that in 10 years, their primary processing for video processing is going to be entirely in the cloud. Typically, they're going to keep ground resources for backup. It's going to be a flip of what people are envisioning today. This is what they're telling us we're going to grow into, and so we're just helping them grow when they need to.
So in that process, I mean, obviously they have to have a lot of confidence in this. They have to be confident that your data centers, that, you know, everything is positioned that no time is lost on the transfer and the processing.
Yeah.
But also, you know, given that they want to do it incrementally, there's got to be a lot of dynamism in terms of how they use the resources, right?
Right.
So how do you get around that, given that, you know, you're going to be investing in a certain amount of resources, and how do you allow that to play like an accordion across multiple customers?
That's part of the underlying magic, I guess, that we did with our cloud offering. It's truly a platform. So the customers that we're engaged with have said, I need to have that flexibility. We've actually built a platform so that they can make decisions within the system. Okay, if we get to a certain amount of volume, I'm going to spin up this many virtual systems in the cloud. Based on certain criteria that they set beforehand, it's kind of set it and go. If they want to change that over time, they can. But it allows them to, for instance, manage the ongoing costs without really giving some limits to it, because there's going to be user error, and there's going to be spikes of demand where you wouldn't necessarily want to put all of it up into the cloud. If it wasn't needed maybe instantaneously, or if there wasn't a time bound on it, you could maybe dial it back and see if that spike really maintains itself. So all those controls are within the system.
Wow. So that's a different version of the cloud.
It's pretty cool,
from what we've heard before.
Yeah.
Now, what about when somebody is ready to go to HEVC, whether it's in your cloud or whether it's with deployed resources that they bought from you? How hard is that going to be?
You know, I've been surprised, because I was part of the MPEG-2 to H.264 transition that happened about 8 years ago. That was actually pretty painful. I was on the encoder side, as you know. It was a bit of a challenge. In this migration, from a codec perspective and from an encoding perspective, it's been fairly simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but in terms of what we're showing here on the floor, which I'd invite you to go see, we'll go see it in a second. We're running live, we're running 1080p, we're running at very high quality levels at really low bit rates for this 1080p signal. And I think the reason why it's easy is because Elemental actually owns the whole stack. We built the codec from the ground up, from the standard, and the way we went about it is we started to build the parts that solidified even before the standardization. And as it standardized, we added more and more and more. And now here today, we're running and we're able to reduce bit rates by 40% now on the first showing of a live HEVC encode of 1080p.
How do you get that onto the deployed resources, and to what extent does the incredibly more intensive processing power change the proportions of streams you can support off any given
It changes
resource?
it, yeah, absolutely. It's the upside of HEVC is that you're going to reduce the bit rate by 40 to 50%. The downside is that it's really hard to do it. It takes a lot of computational complexity. The beauty of Elemental is we are such a powerful platform. We're in many ways overkill for H.264. And so all of the systems that we've deployed in the field worldwide are software upgradable to HEVC. The densities will reduce. It's just math. We can't add a lot, 5 times the complexity and stick it in the same processing power.
Yeah.
So the densities will change. It'll be about a 4-to-1 or a 3-to-1 drop, but it's software, and so you're reusing the assets that you have. You're reusing the knowledge, the APIs that everyone's integrated with worldwide for our technology. It makes it way more seamless than ripping everything out, which is what's going to happen with ASICs. Any ASIC that is being deployed right now is going to have to be ripped out for HEVC.
Yeah, or another one put in for HEVC.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual deployment, do you have customers that are anywhere doing HEVC or getting ready to?
Getting ready to, absolutely. So,
is it primarily mobile, or is it on some of the fixed broadband stuff?
I think mobile's going to drive it. One of the big questions about this show here today is, what is going to be that spark? And I would argue, when a mass market tablet is able to decode really well based on a hardware decoder being implemented, that's what's going to spark the market. So it is a mobile thing. It's also, how do you get 4K, compression rates to be able to get over constrained networks?
Get involved.
That's when they're going to want to get involved, and what potentially makes it worth it to swap out infrastructure. But for us today, in terms of who's doing it, we did a survey actually in December. We got responses from more than 100 of our customers, and as of December, 68% of them wanted to test HEVC within 9 months.
Wow,
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially for something that had not been standardized yet, and there were no working solutions. There have been some offline solutions.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our competitors probably are not running in real time. And so we did a HEVC throwdown challenge on Friday. We did a media alert and encouraging people to come and see that the solution is not smoke and mirrors at all. It's running real time. We can do multiple channels of 1080p transcode to or encode to HEVC in real time.
Let's go see what it looks like.
Okay.
All right, Keith, why don't you tell us what we're looking at here as far as how you're implementing the H265 HEVC?
Yeah, it's hard to know what to call it, right? It changes over time, but we've got two implementations here. Both are running in real time. The top one is on a TV set, and so this is Star's content that they've allowed us to have access to for the show. And we're actually doing an encode of 1080p source, and it's been reduced all the way to 3 megabits per second. So when you think about that in terms of what we've been typically doing in this space for 720p even, which has been the top really. There isn't that much 1080p deployed for over the top. Typically we run that about 5.5. So this is not 720p, it's higher, it's a 1080p, but it's running at 3 megabits per second. And then down here we have a tablet. It's a Qualcomm tablet with a custom player in here, and this is actually running the same source, but we're transcoding it down to a tablet level profile. So it's about 640, but the bit rate is under 500K, and you can see the quality level of this. Especially at a foot or two away, it's a little dark in this particular scene, but the quality level at 500K is extraordinary. It's just, it's the next generation.
Well, very impressive stuff. I mean, that's an extraordinary picture at any bit rate, let alone 3 megs. Just briefly, you announced today Warner Brothers is now making use of your encoding on their end-to-end system. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've tried to do very, very consciously at Elemental is to be relevant to the entire media space, right? So when we first launched 3 years ago, we really targeted the content producers and the programming market, so HBO and ESPN and whatnot. And then we extended to the service provider market, the operator market, Comcast and a number of others that we haven't been able to announce yet. About a year ago, we started to focus on the studio market, and we got very engaged in ultraviolet and DECE and that whole standardization process, because it gave us a foothold into the studio market. And so this morning, we were finally able to announce that Warner Brothers is a customer of Elemental in the studio space. It's a big deal because they won just 2 or 3 months ago a technical Emmy, an excellence award, for their whole digital end-to-end workflow, which is their digitization of their entire process. And underlying that on the transcoding side for converting the source content that's in a typical archive format and creating all the different renditions of format that they want to create for distribution, Elemental is the underlying file transcoder for that solution. So it's a big deal for us.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Warner and the other studios begin to play this capability.
Yeah.
Well, we'll stay tuned. Thanks a lot, Keith.
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.